Okay, so chapter 20, part 2. We're going to pick up with talking about the organelles that are inside. So these are things that are going to be in common with other cells of all types. And so I'm not going to read every single word, but I'm going to tell you the ones that you need to know. Okay. So the cell plasma membrane is one to know. It's the outer rim of the cell, this orange, yellow, tan colored. Inside of it, what it's responsible for is metabolic activity, so taking up and releasing molecules through diffusion, transport, facilitated transport, osmosis, and phagocytosis. It's also the sensing stimuli, and it's also responsible for attaching other cells and objects. The nuclear membrane is another one to know. This is the outer membrane of the nucleus. It surrounds the DNA, protects it, also separates the nucleoplasm from the cytoplasm. You don't need to worry about the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER, and you don't need to know about the Golgi apparatus. What you do need to know about are the lysosomes. So lysosomes are going to be these vesicles, these little pinky things right here. They look like bowls or cups. But they're hydrolytic enzymes converted from inactive to active form and packaged into membranous sacs, so lysosomes. And you can just see them right here. Okay, so you need to be able to label the cell membrane, nuclear membrane, and the lysosomes. Okay, so now inside the cell, you're going to see here we have lysosomes, the incoming vesicles, secretory vesicles, the Golgi apparatus, rough ER. You don't need to worry about any of these on this slide. All right, so two other organelles that are contained by a membrane, because that's what we're talking about, are going to be the mitochondrion and the chloroplast, the mitochondria. So mitochondria are proteins and enzymes involved in aerobic cellular respiration located on the inner surfaces of the cristae. Now, aerobic cellular respiration is anything involving oxygen involved in the releasing of energy from food molecules. So it's essentially what our cells do, or animals, mammal cells. Now, chloroplasts are only found in plants and algae. This is where light energy is converted to chemical bond energy through photosynthesis. So you can see plant cells are going to have both mitochondria and chloroplast, but we don't have chloroplast, which is why I always joke that I feel like I photosynthesize when the sun is out because I don't have chloroplast to do so. But we do know the powerful effects of vitamin D on the human body. It's very important, which is right now, if you're at home and you're studying, please still do get outside because vitamin D is very important for literally almost all of your biochemical processes. Okay, so mitochondria. You might have also heard of them as called the powerhouse of the cell, which biologists really actually do not like that term. I've learned that since working with them. And then you have the chloroplasts, these little tiny pancake structures inside the green thing. And we can see chloroplasts on slides, and you will see them whenever we look at some slides related to plants, I think, next week. All right, so now let's talk about some non-membranous organelles, so things that are not contained in a membrane. The first are called ribosomes. You need to know what ribosomes are. These are composed of RNA. We're going to talk a little bit about RNA in the future, and proteins. And they essentially make proteins, which your body needs for everything. Because proteins are enzymes. Enzymes are important participants in making DNA, transcription, translation, your digestion, lots of other things. Now, microtubulars, microfilaments, intermediate filaments, these are all going to be things that help to form the structure of our cells. So they're kind of like rebar and concrete. That's what I think of them, like construction supplies. They're elongated protein structures. They're interconnected with each other to form various structures. So there are rebar and concrete. They're what help make our structures, or your beams of your house, or the foundation. Now, the cytoskeleton is what provides cell shape, support, and mobility. So this is like, so we are endoskeletons because our skeleton is on the inside. It's what provides us with structure and support. The cytoskeleton does the same thing for the cell. You do not need to worry about what centrioles are. Ooh, actually, I take that back. We need to know because we're going to talk about division. So, centrioles are organized microtubulars into spindle fibers used for attachment of chromosomes during cell division. So, we're going to see these centrioles when we talk about cell division in just a little bit. And then the cilia or flagella, these are used for cellular motion. So, they're kind of like, they look like tails or sometimes feet. If we go back, let's see where that one about the bacteria was. Okay, so in figure A, those little things hanging out at the end, those are flagella. They're helping the cell move along. All right, so this is what microtubulars, filaments, and intermediate filaments look like. You can see the green microtubulars kind of inserting through, so it provides our support. All right, so let's talk about the nucleus. In the nucleus, there are 4 important things to know. The nuclear membrane, which is the outer portion I told y'all we had to know. It's here in yellow, and it's going to separate the nucleoplasm from the cytoplasm. So the nucleoplasm is inside the nucleus, the cytoplasm is outside the nucleus. The nucleopores allow for molecules to pass in and out, so they're kind of like openings in the membrane. The nucleolus is used in manufacturing of ribosomes, so you have to think back to when we defined what a ribosome was. The chromatin are going to be our longly, loosely organized DNA or protein strands, depending on what they are. So it's this red, stringy-like substance inside. And the chromosomes are going to be tightly coiled chromatin, same molecules chromatin, but arranged structurally different. All right, so let's talk about respiration and photosynthesis. So this is how the series breaks down when we eat food. So glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. It's where glucose is going to break down and release electrons and form ATP, and so ATP is the currency. So if you don't eat, you're not producing ATP. The Krebs cycle occurs in the mitochondria, completes the breakdown of glucose, so it finishes up the process, releases carbon dioxide, more ATP, and more electrons, and then it goes on to what's called the electron transport system, which also occurs in the mitochondria, and this converts energy of electrons to ATP. So the whole process produces a ton of ATP, so eating is a good thing. Now, aerobic oxidation of glucose, you see glucose comes in, goes through a glycolysis, produces ATP, becomes pyruvic acid, goes to the Krebs cycle, yet more ATP, and CO2, and then it goes on to the electron transport system, which makes more ATP and some water and some oxygen. Okay, so there's a visual demonstration left to right of what that goes through. Now, photosynthesis is what occurs in plants. So this is light energy coming in, hitting those chloroplasts along with CO2 and water to form glucose and oxygen, which is what we eat and breathe. So this is the process in which plants, algae, and some bacteria transform light energy into chemical bond energy. In algae and green plants, it takes place in the chloroplast, which is the organelle inside the leaf containing the chlorophyll. The green pigment that absorbs the light initiates the light capturing stage. Okay, so in A, you have light capturing events. Light energy comes in, excites some electrons. Then we have what's called the light dependent reactions. Okay, so this is what happens during the day. The light's coming in, and it's going to be producing oxygen, and then it's going to be consuming the ATP. And then we have what's called the light-independent reactions. So at night when we're asleep and plants are not exposed to sunlight, they're still undergoing what's called dark, well, I know it's the Calvin cycle, or not the Calvin cycle. I can't remember what it is, but they're called light-independent reactions. So these are the things that happen in the dark that don't need light. And that's where the sugar is produced, is at night. Okay, so we have 2 phases of photosynthesis, the part that has to have light and the part that doesn't. So we see here the light energy comes in. Oh, it is called the Calvin cycle, but that's the dark, in the green one, that's your dark night cycle on the right. It's just been a long time since I've taken general biology too, probably 2008, so 12 years. So I'm surprised I remembered that. Calvin cycle, okay, which produces carbohydrates, which we then eat. So we're the purple box, glycolysis, Krebs, ETS, which then feeds right back into photosynthesis. So believe it or not, we are just as dependent on plants going through photosynthesis as photosynthesis and plants are dependent on us eating and undergoing glycolysis. So the importance of cell division. Now we said that in order to be a requirement of life, so if we go back to the very beginning, a requirement of life is this generative process, growth and reproduction. So what that means is cells must be the igniting factor of that. Okay, so where it starts. So why do cells divide? Well, to increase the number of cells in the body. This allows the organism to grow. To maintain the body, so replace worn out or dying cells, and to repair damaged tissues. If you get cut, you get cancer, you get pneumonia, whatever it may be, your body has to replenish those cells that die as a result. So what happens during cell division? Well, in mitosis, we're going to replicate genetic material equally distributed between two daughter nuclei, so one becomes two. The cytokinesis is the cell splitting. This is where the cytoplasm divides into two new cells. Each new cell gets one daughter nuclei, and both cells have complete sets of genetic information. Okay, so those are the two things that happens during cell division. So when we have the cell cycle, okay, so this is something you probably have learned at some point in your education. I think middle school is about where I remember learning it. You have 5 stages of the cell cycle. The G1, which is the gap or growth phase 1, S, which is where DNA is synthesized, and G2, gap growth phase 2, are all part of what's called interphase, and that's the first stage of the cell cycle. Okay, this is the stage between cell divisions. The cells are engaged in nuclear metabolic activities. The membrane stays intact. Chromosome replication occurs, but the individual chromosomes are not visible. So this is kind of like the dormant stage. The cells are doing their thing. They're not necessarily under the process of cell division and replication. Now, cell division and is going to be the next row down. This is mitosis and cytokinesis, which is going to be the other 4 phases: the prophase, the metaphase, the anaphase, and the telophase. And this is the 4 stages of mitosis. This is what I would call the active stage, because you're actively dividing. And then you have the G0 gap growth, mitotic dormancy or differentiation. So cells become specialized in their function. So this is where they become lung cells or kidney cells or skin or hair. I shouldn't say hair, but skin or something else like that, where they become specialized. So here we have our interphase. So you can see that most of it, maybe like 80% of our circle diagram, is interphase. And then you have the mitosis and the cytokinesis, the very small portion up there at the top. So the stages are that in interphase, the cell moves from G0 into mitosis. The chromosomes replicate during the S phase. When we get to the prophase, you can see here that the chromatins are going to start to coil into recognizable chromosomes. You see these 2 right here will separate, and they've got the little branches that look like a force field connecting them. In metaphase, you can see here that the green chromosomes are at the center of the cell, okay, and you have the 2 red blocks on either side. And so I always think of meta as middle. The chromosomes are in the middle. In the anaphase, the chromosomes are going to break apart into, or the chromatids will break apart into 2 separate pieces. And so you can see the 4 at top, they kind of look like butterflies, and now the butterflies are in 2 separate pieces, still at the middle, but they're split. And then in the telophase, the chromatids that were separated then become part of new nuclei on either side, and the cells then begin to split themselves. So those are the 4 stages of mitosis. Okay, now this is not considered to be, this is not meiosis, which is where you have the sexual reproduction, the gamete, and the things like that, but mitosis. Okay, so if we go back up to the top, when we looked at that figure right here, this is going to be the growth right there. Okay, all the way across. All right, so this ends all of chapter 20, and you should be, if you're confused about things to know and things not to know, please just send me an email and ask, and I'll be happy to clarify. Because we're not there together, some of the things that I know I normally would not ask you to know, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that now so that we can kind of minimize the amount of stuff that we feel like we're cramming down our throats at this moment. But please just ask for clarification. I can tell you the characteristics of life is going to be really important, okay? So make sure that you're comfortable with the 5 characteristics of life and kind of thinking about an example of what would fall under that particular characteristic, like nutrient uptake. So if I said, you eating McDonald's, I don't know, or whatever your favorite restaurant is an example of what characteristic of life, and you would have to say metabolic. Okay, because it's not any of the other ones. All right, well, that's it for the week, and we'll pick up on chapter 21 starting next week.